welcome everyone to this new session of Renewables Hotline. And today with me, I have the pleasure of being able to talk to someone who knows a lot about getting a job in the renewable energy industry, getting a candidate that you're looking for your company. And he's going to teach us and tell us a little bit about the tricks of the trade and what you need to do to get a job or to get a candidate. Jan, please, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jan Rieche. I'm heading up the global presence of Anavo, an international recruitment company specialized in renewable energy. Maybe I'll give you a few numbers and figures there. We're an Australian business. We have a global presence with offices in Europe, in Africa, in the US, and of course in Australia and New Zealand. I personally have been in renewables recruitment for the past 13 years in recruitment and HR advisory. We're working with some of the best known global project developers, EPC companies, and equipment manufacturers worldwide. And I worked personally and with my team on the ground in Australia, New Zealand, Europe, the US, and Africa. And personally, I filled over 300 roles in the renewable energy industry.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. 300 roles, that's quite impressive, Jan. So thank you very much. You know, this is a huge contribution to our industry. And for everyone out there, I mean, we're in a situation where the industry is growing very, very quickly. We're looking for jobs for candidates pretty much everywhere very, very quickly too. So it's a very interesting time to be in the renewable energy industry. So we're going to hear from Jan more about this, how do you get the right job for you? How do you get the right candidate for you? But first, please tell us, Jan, what is Anavo? Where does it come from? You know, tell us about Polyglot, the original name of the company, and exactly what types of profiles you recruit for. Tell us a little bit more, please.
Sure, I'm trying to be brief on the marketing pitch so we have more time for everything else. So the company Anavo stands for, it's Old Greek and stands for to enlight, to spark, to start up something new. And we are part of the Polyglot Group. Polyglot Group does not only do recruitment, but also HR advisory. We do translations, we do immigration support, we do outsourced payroll, we do setup for business in a new country. So everything you need if you as a business, as a renewable energy business, start going into a new country, we can help you with. The Anavo brand, we've just recently spun off to make it clearer what we do or what we can do and what we have done for the recruitment industry in renewables for the past 10 years. What kind of profiles do we usually recruit for? I think at the end of the day, anything that comes to project management in EPC, so your project managers, your construction managers, your engineers, both on the electrical and civil side. We worked with equipment manufacturers where you have product managers, where you have salespeople, where you have country managers. So pretty much anything, anything in a renewable energy business, might it be one that produces equipment or might that be one that actually does projects, needs on a slightly more senior end of town. So 3 years plus of experience all the way up to C-level is what we do. And we have different people around the globe with the relevant experience to do those jobs.
Excellent. So it's an all-around service for companies that may have a project perhaps in a country and they need specific stuff, but maybe they don't have an office. So that you tick that box. And also it's a number of roles. I think it's pretty much in a role that is needed in the construction of a project and from what I've been hearing from you and all the way to C-level. So that's excellent. And you mentioned a little bit the type of companies that you work with, but can you give us a little bit, perhaps more details, or go into a little bit more detail on the kind of companies that you help recruit for?
Sure. So we usually work with smaller and medium-sized companies because they usually don't have a big HR setup that can support them either in their own country or when they're going overseas. But at the same time, we also work with very big international companies from the US, from Europe, who are actually entering a new market like Australia or New Zealand, where they don't have a setup yet. So they need to set up a company, they need to find a managing director, they eventually need a contract for the person that they employ, they need payroll to pay the person, they need HR advice, they need sometimes translation for documents, marketing material into the local language. With all that we can help with, or we just pieces of that we can help with.
Sound like mainly what you do is offer companies experience and also people with experience that can help them solve their challenges in a specific area, which I suppose is exactly what recruitment does. So, okay, next question is really getting more into the meats of the renewable industry itself and what makes it special. So, at the moment, what notable trends in hiring do you see in the renewable energy industry today?
Well, there's the obvious trend of, if we're looking around the world, anywhere really, probably Europe especially at the moment, but anywhere in the world, more and more large-scale projects are actually coming up. So large scale, that means large-scale solar, large-scale wind projects, but also other industries. So we're seeing your project managers, your project engineers, your construction managers, your supervisors, all with experience in large-scale projects are really very much in demand anywhere around the world, which brings us to our first problem, that everyone is looking for the same type of experience and the same type of profiles. Then, as I mentioned, we're seeing a general strong growth of renewable energy picking up around the world. Again, as I mentioned, especially here in Europe with the recently announced and actioned Green Deal here. And we're seeing the rise of energy storage for distribution of that renewable energy that's being produced and for the transport as well. So in particular, we're talking about batteries. We're talking about, so often recently talked about green hydrogen. These are all trends that are coming up. And then, of course, we're also seeing the probably sometimes a bit forgotten technologies of tidal and wave energy, of bioenergy, and new energies coming up into the mix that are actually being looked at the moment globally by very different players. Might that be big established players, or might that be new startup companies around the world?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ryan. Pretty much all of the big trends in the industry we're seeing also trendy hiring for. Very interesting and expected, I suppose, as well in a way. But the one thing that I wanted to ask you is the most important question for me, really, to understand is, I speak to human resource managers and they say that they cannot find the right candidate for many of the jobs that they have out there. But also I speak to candidates that say they can't get through applications, cannot get jobs, maybe they don't get responses. So it seems like there is like an asymmetry in the market. You know, there's something is happening. But what is happening? Because you're in the middle, you understand it.
Yeah, Belen, we see this every day. Look, there's two ways to look at it, from a company point of view, and then, of course, from a candidate point of view. So from a company point of view, I touched on that before just now. The industry is growing strongly. A lot of these companies are really working at 100%. They don't have sometimes the processes internally set up to deal with that next stage of growth, that always continuous stage of growth. So they need people immediately to work on projects to satisfy their clients in a highly competitive market. So they need people who can hit the ground running, as they always say. That puts us with a problem, because there aren't that many people that actually have the experience and want to move into a new project, into a new country, into a new company all the time. So the issue for companies is they can't find the people that they're looking for right away. Also, they're so busy internally that quite often they don't even find time to answer candidates applying for the jobs. So quite often it's not you, candidate, it's actually the process of the company that they don't have the time and the resources to answer to your application. The second point of view to look at it is from a candidate point of view. Either you're in the industry and you get 10 recruiters calling you every day because they want to hire you for a different project for a different company, so you're getting a bit annoyed. Or if you're on the fringes of the industry, or you're not really in the industry yet, how do I actually get into the industry? That's really the tricky part. So if companies see your application and you don't tick all the boxes, or you don't tick most of the boxes, they don't think that you can actually contribute to the business right away, which is what they need.
Yes, these are all good points. And of course, the problem is things are out of the control of the candidates very, very often. But it's a shame, because as a market asymmetry, there is, clearly demand and supply, but it's not quite matching at the moment. If you are a human resources manager right now, in view of everything that you just said, what are the biggest challenges you have if you're in renewable energy?
Well, look, as I said just now, everyone is looking for the same skill set. So you need to look into your organization. How can I attract the right people? How can I find people with transferable skill set that are similar to what I'm looking for here? And how can I actually implement the proper HR process internally that I can actually bring these people up to speed, so to speak? Because at the end of the day, renewables have become the new Bay Area being the San Francisco Bay Area in the US, where there's been an acute shortage of good talent for years now. So how do I, as a business, as a company, how do I compete to actually attract the right people at the right time? Is it enough just to pay more? Sometimes that helps, of course, but it's just part of the overall package for a candidate. So why is it maybe not enough to pay more, and can I actually pay more? So company culture, as cheesy as it may sound, contribution to a better world, this is what counts to candidates as well. Candidates increasingly look at good internal processes and communication, not just by the HR department to me as a candidate or as a person, but also generally from a company point of view. And all this is very hard for new, growing, expanding company to keep up with when you actually all the time have these constant challenges. And Belen, you might expect me to say this, but specialized recruiters like us are often the solution, because we have better networks, we have different tools that we can actually attract candidates with and by. We have long-grown personal relationships with candidates that we can call for an opportunity that might not be the right opportunity at first glance for them. So someone like us, I'm not saying that we can do miracles, but we can very often help to find the right people for HR managers and the hiring managers.
Yeah, and I would assume also having an impartial sort of helper that is kind of in the middle, in between you and the candidate can also help greatly, because sometimes, like, if you are the only kind of point of view that is considering, it's a little bit harder. Not to speak of like just directly going and speaking to candidates as a company or going as a recruiter. There is a different conversation to be had there, I think. So it's kind of like a little bit of how do you communicate that appropriately. So I think, even though, yes, of course you would say that, at the same time, I think it's important. I often wondered, how there is not even more help, from HR managers, even on things like salary negotiations and things like that, because it's an impartial third party, that can be in the middle, like going back and forth and trying to find like a mid ground between two parties. To me, like, I'm all for, probably more than less of you guys.
Well,
and sorry, go on.
Belen, firstly, when you actually, for instance, as a hiring manager, you know someone already you think who's good for the job, it doesn't mean that there's someone else who's better for the job. Secondly, quite often it's still a little bit frowned upon if from one company you go directly to another company and take the people out. It's just not gentlemanlike, if you want to put it that way. And thirdly, we can also give companies advice on salaries, packages, company culture, things that they might have to better in their offer, or something that as a company they should communicate stronger to attract more candidates.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So thank you very much for clarifying those 3 points, because they're very, very important and to consider, guys, in the HR side of things. And now I'd like to go to the other side of things, the side of the candidates. What do you see the challenges that the candidates have, or the people that are looking for jobs have, and how do they overcome them, in this specific industry, or how to overcome them?
Yeah, so I think for candidates, the biggest challenges are actually either, as I said before, you're in the business, you're doing the project, everyone knows you will get many calls by recruiters. Or you're not in the industry yet, or you don't have a public enough profile, so people don't come to you, but you're applying for roles. As you mentioned before, Belen, the issue sometimes you're having is that you never hear back from a company that is just overrun with work and processes and that can't really reply to you in their own right. So the question is, how do I land my first or my first job or my new job in this industry? And that's really a problem that a lot of candidates face at the moment. So if you're outside the industry, the question is, how do I land my first job if I don't have the experience of X years working as a project manager, as a product manager, or in sales of solar panels, for instance? How do I get to talk to the company and the hiring managers? So there, my advice is, as a candidate who's come from the outside of the market and actually wants to use their experience externally to move that across into the industry, I would suggest for you to map the market, see what's happening, see who's out there, look at case studies that are out there, so you can actually see where companies or projects had problems, where someone like yourself with experience could actually contribute. Learn the jargon. That's it's quite important. There's not much, but if you speak the jargon, people get the impression that you have either done your research or that you're already inside the industry. Identify the key trends and topics that are really actually happening at the moment. And then, most importantly, show how your skills that you have already are transferable, and show your willingness to actually learn and really, apply your current knowledge to the new job. Use your network. That's quite often, that's a big thing. If you have a network, use it in order to get a first shot to at least talk to a company. Once you talk to a company, of course, still up to you in the interview and the interviewer, but you've done most of the way. That's actually quite a rocky path. Wherever it's legally possible in your country, try and volunteer or start part-time in a role. And start looking at companies in the consulting space or at suppliers at the fringe of the renewable energy industry, where your skills are quite often more transferable than a company that's actually working directly in renewables. I'll give you an example. 15 years ago, when I first started to work in recruitment in renewables, I wanted to work in renewables. And I wasn't an engineer, and there weren't that many companies around at the time. So I looked at the market, where can I actually add value? I worked in recruitment already at the time, in IT recruitment. So I saw a transferable skill here, actually use my recruitment skills to move into the renewable energy space. Back then in 2008, global financial crisis wasn't easy, but the networks built back then are still helping me to this day, to actually having the ability to speak to senior people, senior managers in the industry, might that be as candidates or might that be as clients.
Thank you very much, Jan, for also sharing that with us. I think it's a great example of what you just said, and congratulations, because you are in the renewable energy industry now. I kind of was a similar thing for me. I started in a different industry, but then I moved to renewables, but it was many years ago. So now, to be honest, renewables is mostly what I've done, really. I haven't really, by comparison, done much else. I wanted to ask, it seems like I'm skipping a little bit ahead, but it sounds like this industry is very, very international, and we had to internationalize very, very quickly, because we were kind of seeking the markets, where the next renewable energy wave was going at. And at the moment, we are in a situation where it's kind of growing everywhere. So you could probably have a job long term in one place, in renewable energy, and be fine. But for many, many years, we've been like moving around. So for this very international job, how do candidates go about moving internationally if they want to do so? Or also, how do HR managers hire for international roles, or international moving roles? If you could tell us a little bit more about how to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and you're spot on there, Belen. We've seen this around the world, not just for the big companies actually moving into different geographies, doing projects there, but we also saw for smaller project development companies, EPC companies, and following them, of course, the equipment manufacturers, that they've actually moved around the world. So they needed to set up. Quite often they need local talent to work for them, but at the same time, they also quite often like to transfer some of their own people across. So both from a company and from a candidate point of view, working in a different geography in renewables is actually quite attractive. It's probably in this industry easier than in many other industries to actually get a transfer. Might that be internally within your company? If you, as a company, you're planning to do that, service company like us can help you actually with the visa requirements and all these kind of things that can be quite daunting sometimes if you want to move from, say, Spain, your business, to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and so forth. But look, at the end of the day, the first port of call, of course, is if you don't have a setup in the country already where you can actually rely on your own local resources, work with international recruiters like us that actually have people on the ground. We can give you advice on how easy it is to find a person, how to employ them, if you need to set up a company or not. Sometimes you don't even need to set up a company. We can help you with that. What you need to pay, how you attract them, and how you can actually work through the entire HR process, paying benefits and all this sort of stuff to the state. As a candidate, again, I mentioned this before, but use your network. You might know someone in your network who actually opens up a branch in a different geography you would like to work in. You can speak with that company at headquarters in your country to actually then transfer across. And as a person internally, if you can, apply for a transfer internally to go abroad. You'll find it easier sometimes if you come at the right time, easier than you think that it actually works. So in our industry, being quite international, both from the way projects are being done, as well as equipment is being distributed around the world, it's actually a very international industry where you actually get the opportunity to work in a different geography, either for a certain amount of time, a project, or set amount of years, or actually for good to emigrate to, say, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US.
Thank you very much, Jan. And there is a lot of movement for sure. So we'll watch the space to see, how it continues to evolve. You've been talking a lot about, what's going on and the mismatch between supply and demand right now in the industry. And to me, it just sounds like there is a lot of expectation management that you have to do, from the HR side and from the candidate side. I just wanted to know, how do you help companies and candidates go through this kind of like time, where they're looking for someone, or like they're looking for a job, and try to match them up, and keeping the sort of their expectations in check so that there is like a good resolution?
Sure. So I guess the expectations by a company are, I need someone for the project. I need that person right away in X amount of weeks. So how do I find that person, and why can't I find that person? From a candidate point of view, I'm applying for a role, but I don't hear back, or my skills are not the right skills. What's going on? So again, our part of the expectation management is for companies to help them to find the right offer that they put out there to attract candidates. That might be the salary, of course, but it's not always just the salary. It's company culture. It's long-term incentives to stay with the project or stay with the company. It's also really giving the candidates a clear path how they can grow within the organization. So that's important to attract candidates. And again, it's important to listen to people in the industry that are just outside your company, your comfort zone, people that you know, because quite often bigger market trends are slightly different from what you're seeing every day in your own environment. So again, at least listening to the likes of us who actually have the experience to speak to different companies and people in the business every day is of value. Because again, we have different tools than your local HR manager has. We have our own networks. We quite often come in as the impartial party when we're talking to candidates who might not consider your company in the beginning for whatever reason, some bad publicity they've picked up, or some bad experience by a disgruntled employee who left a long time ago. So things we can smooth over and then actually talk about really what the role of the company has to offer. And We can also source candidates from overseas. So if you're looking for someone in the US, for instance, someone who works in Australia or in the UK on a similar project before might actually be the person who can help. From a candidate point of view, as a candidate, if you work with us to work with to apply for a role with the company, we often have the better direct access to the hiring managers or the HR managers. So we are in a better position to give you feedback through the process rather than hearing nothing and then either hearing something that you get an interview and then hearing nothing again. So we can actually help you more through the process and just get better timing out of your experience in applying for a company. This, by the way, Belen, is actually something that leaves quite often a bad taste in the mouth of candidates when they get completely ignored because for whatever reason their application doesn't get to the right person. So they actually get that bad experience with the company without the company even knowing about it. So if we handle candidates, they always get a feedback from us, even if they're not successful, but we try to give them as much information as possible, why they haven't been successful and what they can be doing or should be doing better the next time with their next application.
Feedback is so important, and it is true that today you get nothing from the interviews, from the companies. I mean, very, very rare that a company will give you feedback, even if you request it. So, that I think for candidates should make a huge difference to be working with your company or companies, in the recruitment side. If at least, it allows you to kind of make some progress in your own evolution. So
I believe it's very important, Belen, because as a candidate, you share the most valuable that you have, which is your experience, your CV, right? You share that with a company. That's quite confidential information. So at least you would expect that someone says, yes, we have it, your information is safe with us, and yes, you're being considered, or you're not being considered. So I'm entirely with you, and we're trying our best to actually bridge that gap whenever we're working with a company and a candidate. Again, not to really protect companies not doing that, but it's quite often hard for these companies. They haven't been set up for 30, 40, 50 years, and they have big HR departments that can actually really take care of that. They should be having those because human resources are, and everyone is saying that, the most valuable resource in almost any business. But again, they're growing so strongly that kind of setting up these operations, these operational processes, it's in the process at the moment, but it still takes time.
It's also a little bit alienating, I think, because the way to forward, and to make things more efficient, which makes perfect sense for the HR department, includes, for example, using HR softwares. They're looking for keywords, and I mean, if you don't have, and if you don't know this, if you don't spend quite a lot of time researching this, and if you don't understand what the keywords are, it's very easy to be left out. A perfectly good candidate not even be read by a person. Just simply being moved away. So there is a lot of things in there, and I think also there is an issue here for companies because you've been not reading the CVs of good candidates just because they haven't used the keyword. It's a little bit dangerous, but for sure, there is a lot of. I think in the next few years, this industry needs, the HR industry, and needs to move forward quite a bit in the way that that the candidates are looked at, I suppose. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I want to ask you a question about job growth. Imagine someone that is either looking at this industry as an opportunity, for their career, or someone that has been here for a while and is wondering, should I stay? Should I make a side step? Is like a thing about where is the job growth coming from? Is it here to stay? How do I position myself so that the job still here and it leads me to further and better in the future, so that I can make a whole entire career out of it. So, just a really open question about, how to position yourself, what are the right functions and stuff.
Sure, that's a good question. So I mentioned this before, those large-scale projects, big solar installations, big wind installations, that will continue to boom around the world. The projects probably get a bit trickier now that the easy projects have been done. the localities might get different. I'm foreseeing a big boom for Africa eventually for big projects to grow there. So anything to do with large-scale projects, meaning engineers for construction, but also for development, that will grow. This will also continue to offer opportunities for people from outside the industry that have good project management and project engineering experience to come across into the industry. I think if we're looking at the newer technologies, the installation of batteries and other storage mediums, that will actually that will increase to grow. Green hydrogen, green ammonia is a big buzzword here, which brings me to new technologies. I think we just mentioned green hydrogen, but also tidal and wave, something that's been around for a long time, is coming slowly but surely to maturity now. Biomass has been a fairly big contributor to renewable energy generation in many countries. That's coming back to the fore again now. And I guess what makes it interesting is now, I mentioned before that companies are setting themselves up more and more like, I guess, old-fashioned organizations with good structures and good processes. That actually offers the opportunity for people in HQ functions, marketing, payroll, finance, HR, to actually move across from different industries with their experience and to bring that experience to the renewable energy industry. And I guess generally renewable energy is definitely here to stay. We'll see quite a few different trends, different technologies, improved technologies coming to the fore. But for the next 10, 20 years, renewable energy is actually a huge part, or will be a huge part of our work life. And there's many new trends to come. I mean, we're looking at distributed generation versus local generation in houses, in communities, and how do you actually distribute the energy. So there's many new jobs coming up and many more jobs in existing roles that we already have that will be created all around the world.
Thank you, Jan. In fact, an entire pandemic recovery effort in many places relies very heavily on renewable energy. So I think that's a good thing. It's just we need more jobs and good jobs that last a very, very long time. So question just in terms of if I was a HR manager in a company, from your point of view, what do I need to do to get the best talent in the renewable energy industry right now?
The best talent in the renewable energy industry right now is, what you need to do is, again, of course, you need to pay according to market. You need to show people in a short-term and a long-term way how they can participate in the success of your project or your company. So that's, I guess, a clear way of putting bonuses and putting long-term incentives, shares, and so forth on the table. Candidates are more and more interested in these things these days. You need to, well, firstly create, but then also communicate the company culture that you have, that it's actually your organization is not just a fun place to work at, but also a safe workplace when it comes to women working in your organization, all these types of things. You need to have it, but you also need to communicate that. Thirdly, be flexible when it comes to where people work. I think the pandemic at the moment is bringing this to the fore, but our industry has been, I think, very progressive in a way right from the start, mainly because of the lack of a proper setup everywhere, that people were actually able to work partly or entirely from home or from locations they wished for, rather than a headquarters office that they always had to travel to and work in. So that's important. I guess build up strong internal processes. A lot of the companies, and sometimes even smaller companies that actually are successful today, they probably didn't look like winners from the start, are actually the ones that managed, while doing their projects, selling their goods that they need to sell, so bringing the money in, at the same time, not just chasing the next dollar or euro, but also actually creating internal process that prepares your organization for growth, not just from a HR point of view, how do I get the next people into the organization, but also from a vision of the company, how do I set the organization up? How do I communicate this? This is actually how you attract good talent these days. You pay them well, you involve them in your company, in your project, and you create an environment and processes that actually attracts people to work in your organization.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Very, very great summary. Thank you very much, Jan. I only have one follow-up question on what you said now, and is you mentioned flexibility and working from home, and I just, as a one thing that the candidates like. Do you think it's here to stay? I mean, this is not a conversation about renewable energy. It's a conversation on generally, the future of work, so to speak. But in our industry specifically, do you see it here to stay? Do you see something that the flexibility can continue? And of course, I'm not talking about roles in the field. I'm talking about more roles that can be done from anywhere.
Yes, of course, there are roles if you're actually putting solar panels onto a table in a big solar project, for instance. You can't do that from home, of course. But to answer your question, I think it's here to stay. I think companies have seen that home setups where possible are actually good. They actually give you more relaxed, more loyal employees. Will we see an environment where we have just a few jobs in a headquarter office and everyone else is working distributed around the world? No, that won't work for many reasons. Firstly, you have people starting fresh in your organization or are new starters after university or after their apprenticeship. You can't just put them into a home office and expect them to pick things up, things that you usually ask over the shoulder, over a drink of water at the water cooler or a coffee in the kitchen. That you can't replace, so you need that. Secondly, we talked about culture, company culture before, that's becoming more and more important, employer branding. If you want to create, keep and evolve a culture, you need to be with people. And you can't do that every 3 or 6 months in a global or regional meeting. So you actually need to we need to find a way where we can make it easier for people to work from home. So that they have, say, 2 or 3 days from home, which solves a lot of questions, congestion on your way to work, rush hour. It limits or curbs our CO2 emissions right away because less people have to travel back and forth. But at the same time, people get quite efficient and are able to have a better work-life balance. And at the same time, having people in the office when possible, outside pandemic times, that is, of course. But when you actually have people in the office, use that time effectively for not having them to work there, but actually for team building activities, for improving and evolving your culture. So I think to answer your question in one sentence, yes, it's here to stay, but we won't go entirely office-based, nor will we go entirely home office-based.
It'll be a hybrid solution. I like that, the best of both worlds. So thank you very much, Jan. You've been an absolute champ answering all our questions. I think that if for all the candidates out there that are looking for jobs, you want someone in your corner that can give you honest feedback, that can help you along, that can give you an impartial view, you got your guy here. You should contact Jan. And for HR managers, if you guys are getting stuck, you can't find the profile that you're looking for, and you need to readjust, an impartial view will help you immensely. So, Jan's your guy. By the sounds of things, get in touch with him. Thank you very much for all of these honest answers, Jan. And it's never black or white, is it? There is always a negotiation going on in there.
No, that would be too easy. But again, I guess we can't do miracles. We can't clone people, but we can help. We can help you. We're not charging for a conversation where we can give you some advice on what you need to do differently, or what sometimes you just need to portray differently in order to find the right people. And we can also help you find those people when you charge us to do so. And as an organization, we can help you set up in a new country, HR advice, payroll advice, all that stuff we can help with. But we all work in a great industry. People are becoming more a bottleneck of a lot of projects or expansions for companies because they can't find the right people to do it for them and with them. So human resources are a critical factor that needs to be treated well, both when we want to find them, when we have them, and sometimes even when we're letting them go. We need to treat them well, and this is where we can help. And this industry is to grow. So these pains that we're having at the moment of not finding the right people, they're not going away. They're going to get, if anything, they get worse. So this is something that not just hiring managers and HR managers, but people at C-level need to look at and consider strongly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? There are bad problems to have, which is when you're not selling. And another good problem to have is when you're selling too much and then you need to grow quickly. And the technology industry has gone through this and is still, to a certain extent, going through it for like a decade now. And you come from the IT side, so you can bring all of that know-how into our industry here as well. So you guys, if you're looking for a job, if you're looking to the renewable energy world, welcome. You know, we need all of this talent, and you'll be here for a long time, and you're going to be contributing to a better world. So that's it, Jan. I don't know if you want to add anything else. Other than that, we'll leave it for today. And I thank you very, very much for your time and for answering my questions in this topic that is not only is very interesting and very timely. It's like there is a lot of people out there that need this information.
Pleasure, Belen. Thank you for having me. And maybe my final couple of sentences here is probably to the people outside the industry that want to get into the industry now. Don't give up. I mean, sometimes you land the right job at your first try because you know someone or you're just the right person at the right place at the right time. Most of the time, it's harder. Keep at it. Your skills, most of your skills that you have are transferable. We just need to find the right place, right time, right company. And as I mentioned before, the more this is growing, the demand for talent, even if people wouldn't want to, they would have to look across. Where are the talents? Where are the skills that I can transfer across? And how do I set my organization up in order to actually take these kind of skills and actually make them work for my organization, for my product? Don't give up. Keep trying.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jan. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.